Welcome in, everybody, to the flagship podcast recap of a rough night at DKR. I am Chip Brown of horns247.com, joined as always by the one and only, my esteemed colleague, Eric Henry of horns247.com. And Eric, tonight there was so much excitement and anticipation. Top 5 showdown for the first time at DKR since 2006. Could have been a potential sea change above the Southeastern Conference, but that did not happen tonight, Eric. It was Georgia dominating Texas to the point where Steve Sarkisian pulls Quinn Ewers to help him clear his head and brings in Arch Manning with 4:43 left in the second quarter. Things didn't go much better for Arch Manning, although he did have a 21-yard run, the longest run for the Longhorns tonight. But Quinn Ewers returns in the second half, leads the Longhorns on 2 scoring drives, one from the 9-yard line that went straight backwards after Quinn Ewers got sacked for an 8-yard loss. But they were able to connect Ewers to Jaden Blue for a 17-yard touchdown. But nonetheless, that was it. Tons of things to talk about, not many of them very pretty. But Eric, Georgia 30, Texas 15. Your thoughts?
You know, Chip, my instantaneous thoughts, to be quite frank, as I'm still here at Darrell K. Royal Texas Memorial Stadium, having a chance to, let it sink in.
Looking very sharp, by the way.
Well, I appreciate that, Chip. I broke out the good suit thinking, hey, today might be a special day for the Longhorns. A case can be made that this is or was the biggest game in this venue in a very long time, at least since 2006. There have been some who have speculated that, or said that it's the biggest game in this venue in over 5-6 decades, right? So I broke out the sharp suit for that. But Chip, my instantaneous thoughts, quite frankly, are this was and is Texas's offensive ineptitude coming home to roost. What I mean by that is this. We talked about last week in the instant reaction that Texas got off to a real sluggish first quarter start, Chip. I believe it was something like 18 yards or 13 yards. I just wrote it in my story. It's up on horns247.com. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it was they had under 20 yards in the first quarter last week, Chip. We know what happened, right? Texas's defense bailed them out because they were facing an Oklahoma offense that, quite frankly, wasn't equipped to capitalize on those opportunities. This week, it wasn't necessarily that they faced a Georgia offense that was world beaters, but they faced a much better team. One that defensively was capable of stifling Texas for the duration of the game. And B, offensively, when you give Georgia the amount of short fields that Georgia had, especially early going, Chip, they were able to find a way to put points on the board, whether it was the 2 Travis Etienne touchdowns or the field goals. I won't go too far into the game without giving an opportunity to talk about the obvious, which is the quarterback. We can't even call it switch because Steve Sarkisian said post-game it was a chance for Quinn to clear his head. But by the time that Arch Manning entered the game, as Steve Sarkisian said, to possibly spark the offense, Texas was down 20-0, right? So that's a real tough ask of your redshirt freshman quarterback, despite what he's done, or what he did, I should say, against Louisiana Monroe or UTSA. It's a tough ask to come in and say, hey, spark us down 20-0 against the number 5 team in the nation, Chip. So you asked me what is my biggest takeaway or what's my instantaneous thought? This was Texas's inability to start fast offensively, something that they've relied on heavily this year via the pass primarily, Chip. And when we, trade back and forth, I'd love to have an opportunity to really hammer home some of the run game issues, but their inability to get the pass game going early and Georgia's ability to stifle the offense and capitalize on those opportunities, Chip.
Yeah, this was this was a regression for the Texas offense for sure, because if you'd have told me that coming out of this game, you would have intercepted Carson Beck 3 times, he would not have thrown for a touchdown, that you hold Georgia to 108 yards rushing, 3.6 per carry, and only 175 yards passing, I would have said, okay, Texas won the game. But the offense was so inept that they got interceptions from Andrew Makuba. Beautiful interception. He goes high in the air, breaks up the pass, catches the carom on his way down. And Andrew Makuba ends up leaving the game with a knee injury. We don't know how severe that is, but on the heels of Derek Williams being lost for the season due to a knee injury, very concerning. But yeah, Texas gets a couple of interceptions in the first quarter. One at the Georgia 42-yard line. And they get nothing out of that. That was a world-class 3-and-out, 3 plays, 1 yard. And there were 3 3-and-outs in the first half. There was a 3-play interception drive as well. Quinn Ewers, 2 fumbles, an interception. Arch Manning, a strip sack, fumble as well. So Steve Sarkisian looked for a spark from Arch Manning, clear Quinn Ewers' head. But Eric, the concerning thing for me is Quinn Ewers wasn't seeing the field and was getting antsy. I get it. Georgia's pass rush is real.
Yeah.
They were dialed in. I mean, they sacked Texas quarterbacks 7 times. Texas had given up 6 sacks all season. 11 tackles for loss for Georgia. I mean, this was complete domination by the Georgia defense. But again, the Texas defense forced 3 turnovers, missed some tackles. I want to go back, Eric, to the very first drive.
Yeah.
Texas had, 3rd and 9? Ewers throws a little dump pass to Quintravian Wisner, who started tonight instead of Jaden Blue. And he had nothing but green grass ahead of him. He would have caught the ball and run for a first down, but he drops it. So they're off the field, just like that. I thought that set a tone for this Texas offense, because if Wisner catches that ball, converts, 3rd and 9, okay, there's some momentum, but they had none. They had no momentum offensively, it felt like, in the first half.
Yeah, Chip, I mean, you talk about not getting any momentum. And again, I'm going to belabor this point. I talked about it a little bit in last week's, live post-game reaction. Quintravian Wisner ran for, 13 carries for $118 last week, Chip, but they were reliant on the chunk play, right? One of those carries was 40-something yards. The other one was the 36-yard, which, of course, was fumbled, and Silas Bolden recovered it. You can frame it however you want. And Steve Sarkisian has kind of talked about, hey, if I look at the box score, as he's got the box score here, and I see 300 passing and 200 rushing, I'm going to take it. That's exactly what Steve Sarkisian said to me post Louisiana Monroe, right? Now, Chip, look at the box score here. It's going to tell me that Trey Wisner ran for 15 times, 52 yards, 3.5 yards a pop. I know he had 1 carry of 9 yards, 1 carry of 7 yards. After that, Chip, quite frankly, they were abysmal running the ball. The majority of those yards came in the second half. Texas ended the first half. I don't have the exact number. I believe it was -2 yards in the first half rushing. We all know Steve Sarkisian has a streak of 1,000-yard rushers, and that streak is severely in jeopardy this year. But it's my belief, Chip, that it's not about the total number of yards they get, but it's the timely yards, the ability to keep this offense on schedule. This season, more than any, Steve Sarkisian has chosen to pass the ball early in games. His own rationale is to go out there and develop a lead. But he openly said on Monday, I have to see how this team reacts if we don't play with a lead. Well, you're not doing your defense any favors when, as you talked about, you get that drive, you go 3 plays, -1 yard, you put them back out there on the field, and you can't sustain drives, help your defense out by running the ball, chewing up some clock. And even Steve said himself, they were in too many third and medium situations they were having to try to convert. Well, a way to do that is to have an adequate run game. So that, to me, Chip, is very concerning. Again, I'm not saying that the Texas run game is in dire straits. They clearly have talents. However, Jaden Blue didn't get a carry tonight. And as Steve Sarkisian said, that was a byproduct of the circumstances of the game. I hear you. But given the amount of injuries, we all know C.J. Baxter, Christian Clark were injured in the preseason, you're going to need to develop a steady run game for the duration, for the long haul of what Texas is trying to accomplish, especially, Chip, as you pointed out, with Quinn Ewers seemingly not right. Whether that's a health issue, his eyes not seeing what he needs to seeing issue. But if Quinn Ewers isn't that player that took you to Michigan and won and opened the season as hot as he was, as he was playing, this offense is not sustainable without some sort of steady, consistent run game to set them up to be in manageable situations, Chip.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if honestly, tonight was a night where you could have used Arch Manning's legs, and they did show up. His first drive was ugly. He comes in with 4:43 left in the second quarter. They did convert a 3rd and 5 because there was a face mask penalty on Georgia. But then he threw incomplete on first down. On 2nd and 10, there was a false start on Cam Williams. Then on 2nd and 15, Manning throws for 8 yards. And then on 3rd and 7, he throws deep to DeAndre Moore, and they miss. I might have, Steve Sarkisian doesn't like to run the quarterback, and Arch Manning's 21-yard run was a scramble. It was not a called run. He scrambled right up the middle of the field. It gets him from the 20 to the 41, and then, it just they just couldn't get into any rhythm. But this is a game where you might want to run the quarterback a little bit, and that's just not in Steve Sarkisian's DNA. So, it is sometimes. The 67-yard touchdown run he had against UTSA was a zone read. Really clever play call, honestly. But Eric, everyone was out of sync offensively tonight. Steve Sarkisian was out of sync. The players were out of sync. And there were times I looked over at you and I said, Quinn had guys open. I mean, he had guys open underneath. He tried to go a little further downfield. It just wasn't there. There were times he left the pocket when he shouldn't have, and it ended up in him getting harassed. And and then there were times where Georgia sent 5-6 guys, and it got home. The corner blitz that he gets smashed from behind, fumbles it deep in Texas territory. Georgia punches that in for a touchdown. Great call by Georgia. Kelvin Banks was blocking his man. But there was no back there, no tight end there to help pick up that blitz. It was just a well-timed blitz. But there were times where, Quinn's in the end zone. He's got all day. And then finally, a guy gets around his feet and he falls down at the 2. Didn't even really get hit. That was concerning to me. It just seems like he's still not all there, and they got to figure it out, because now they're going to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt knows exactly who they are offensively with Diego Pavia. Isn't Vanderbilt coming off a off week?
No, Vandy beat Ball State today.
Oh, that's right.
They didn't look impressive. It was 24-4. Well, put you this way. They looked like a Diego Pavi offense, Chip, and we'll get into that plenty in this week's flagship. So I shouldn't say they didn't look impressive. They won, but, it is what it is.
Yeah, and this is not the end of the world. I mean, look, Texas, going into this season, you and I both had Texas, dropping, this game. And so you lose to Georgia, and Georgia got some players back on defense who really made a difference. So it's just the way that that first half looked like Texas was in quicksand offensively, and it was just awful. So like you said, they had 2 yards. They had 2 yards rushing in the first half. 2. They had 3 yards in the first quarter and -1 in the second quarter.
There you go. Yeah.
2 yards rushing, 16 carries for 2 yards. So, credit Georgia. They were inspired. They were desperate. Eric, we do have to mention this crazy turn of event in the game. The SEC has issued a statement regarding the defensive pass interference flag that they picked up. Jahdae Barron was initially called for defensive pass interference on a play where he intercepted the ball, ran it back 36 yards to the Georgia 9. That caused the Texas student section to start pelting the field with water bottles. Steve Sarkisian's out on the field waving his arms and screaming for the students to stop. The cleanup takes 4 minutes, and then the referee announces we're picking up the flag because there was no defensive pass interference. I think it was the right call. But Kirby Smart, after the game, said they tried to rob us of this game. He kind of got dramatic about it, but it was a crazy turn of events. And you got the statement from the SEC.
Yeah, Chip, I'll pull it back up here. As I said, I'm in the coach's box. I got the actual statement over by the press box seat. Let me go ahead and pull it up here on my phone. The actual statement from the SEC reads as follows. If I can just quickly pull that up here. Give me a second here, Chip. I had it pulled up, but it reads. All right, here we go. With 3:12 to play in the third quarter of the Georgia-Texas game, Texas intercepted a pass at Texas's 46-yard line and returned it to the Texas 9-yard line. Texas was flagged for committing defensive pass interference on the play, which resulted in Georgia maintaining the ball with a first down. The game officials gathered to discuss the play, which is permitted to ensure the proper penalty is enforced at the time, at which time the calling official reported that he had erred and a foul should not have been called for DPI. Consequently, Texas was awarded the ball to 9-yard line. While the original evaluation and assessment of the penalty was not properly executed, it is unacceptable to have debris thrown on the field at any time. The disruption of the game due to debris being thrown onto the field will be reviewed by the conference office related to the SEC sportsmanship policies and procedures. Chip, that statement sounds like a lot of a word salad. Also, I'll be honest, and I don't want to sound like I'm coming down on Greg Sankey. It sounds as if what they're saying, Chip, is they had already made their mind up that they'd erred on the call prior to the debris being thrown, and then that is what caused a delay. Hey, I'll have to go back and watch the replay, Chip. All I'll say is this. It looked to me as if prior to the student section throwing debris, that was going to be Georgia football. That's just what it looked like to me. I'll go back and watch the replay. I don't know if you saw it any differently. I just want to make, if I may, Chip, one quick point before I pass it to you to kind of put a cap on this. Another reason with the overarching theme of this, today's game was Texas's offensive ineptitude. The score read 30-15. Quite frankly, and this may not make me the most popular person in Austin, you take away that touchdown they got, it looks much worse, Chip. There were yards gained in that, which we can all call a spade a spade. The right call was made. That was not defensive pass interference on Jahdae Barron. And Georgia was ready to snap the ball when debris was being thrown, which is why I don't believe that statement there. The ball was spotted. Georgia was getting ready to run a play when all of a sudden you start seeing players kind of stopping, like, what's going on? So we can also, be two things are true, right? If Georgia snaps that ball, we don't get to this point. That's probably 7 points that are off the board there, and this ball game looks much worse. So that's just me tying a whole bunch of things there together, Chip. I'll let you pass it back to you to kind of close it up.
Yeah, it was a crazy turn of events. I do think that on that play, Arian Smith initiated the contact with Jahdae Barron, and I think they got the call right. But a couple other, things. Again, the offensive line really struggled. Not only, they didn't give up all the sacks, but Georgia sacks Texas's quarterback 7 times. Texas had given up 6 sacks through 6 games. There were 4 false start penalties. This has been a steady theme for the Texas offensive line, and those 4 false start penalties were killers. They killed 4 different drives, including there was a false start on 4th and 1 from the inside the Georgia 15 that resulted in a 4th and 6 that Texas did not convert. And Steve Sarkisian was very aggressive. He turned down a 47-yard field goal attempt to go for it on another 4th and 6 that they did not convert. And so untimely penalties were a killer. And, if we're going to focus on some of the positives, Jahdae Barron, unbelievable. 2 interceptions in this game. 1 leads to a Texas touchdown. I thought Jaden Blue had a good game. He was the leading receiver with 7 catches for 48 yards in that 17-yard touchdown reception that we mentioned. Andrew Makuba, unbelievable, tip, carom, interception early on in Georgia territory that the Texas offense did nothing with. Matt Golden, 3 catches, 77 yards. Gunnar Helm had some, 6 catches on 6 targets. But and Alfred Collins, I thought, really showed up in, getting pressure. Michael Taft was the leading tackler. Anthony Hill, 8 tackles and a sack, 1.5 tackles for loss. So there were some glimmers in there. But I thought one of the MVPs for Georgia was their punter. Good heavens. How about a little love for my man Thorson? He averaged 54 yards per punt, Eric, and they were down, deep in Texas territory. That guy was flipping the field like crazy. Texas has to regroup. Quinn Ewers did not look happy at all after this game. And, someone asked him, you ready for more chatter about whether it should be you or Arch? And he's like, not really. And he kind of, he's very pleasant with us, but when his time was up, he kind of bowled right out of there. So he's one of the tip of the spear leaders on this team, and we'll see how he regroups, because this team needs that experience. They need him to look like the Quinn Ewers who went to Alabama and who went to Michigan and was the guy who just seemed oblivious to all the noise around him. And so we'll see how that goes. Any closing thoughts, Eric?
No, the biggest closing thought for me is I think it's going to make for a very interesting week here on the 40 acres. We'll look forward to seeing how this team responds. They'll have 7 days to do it, and that'll make the difference in my mind.
All right, there you have it. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to this flagship podcast recap of the crash landing of the #1 Longhorns, losing 30-15 to 5th-ranked Georgia. Next up for the Longhorns, a trip to Nashville to face the Commodores, led by Diego Pavia. We'll have all kinds of content tonight, tomorrow, and of course, going into that game at Vanderbilt next Saturday. Thanks again so much for tuning in. Please like and subscribe the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. Until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Make sure you become an annual member so that you have VIP access to all the team sites on the preeminent 24/7 Sports Network. For Eric Henry, I am Chip Brown. Stay safe and keep the faith.